Alright. Sup. Greetings. I'm here with another video. Uh, let's dive in. So, where were we? Exactly. Um, we're playing Eurofront for any new viewers. And we're here playing the game. Eurofront 2, 2nd edition. Highly recommend. Good game. If you want to play against me, I'm not saying you have to, but if you want to, let me know. Look at, I think my email is on the, it's on the YouTube channel. And, send me an email. We'll set up a Zoom meeting, and we'll play the game. And yeah, I'll record it, and it'll be interesting. I think the community of Eurofront would appreciate the community communicating more, with a bit more, how you say, I think on the Eastern Front, they called it Blitzkrieg. That's what they called it, for sure. They did not call it Bewegungskrieg, because that would actually imply, like, smooth, timely maneuvering in a synchronized, harmonious way that obviously the Americans never developed as good. No, because they had apparently like unlimited artillery. So, but we're playing a strategic game. So, this game is about strategy. Nothing to do with tactics. Clearly not, because that would imply very mechanical components of pieces or objects moving across other objects or pieces, areas. No, hexes in this game. And so that would imply like super mechanical process. And this game is a strategic game. And there's a difference between tactics and strategy. And it shows in this game really well. I played against this one guy. Ah, man. And he was British. Apparently, he really liked the British. Not even the Americans. I don't even think he knew how to play as the Americans. But he played really well with the British. And after taking a few notes, I mean, look at our situation here. Are you serious? I mean, can anybody do a landing as good as this? Obviously not. Hold on, I'm getting a spam call. And so because of that, right, we got a massive, just British fortress, literally in Belgium, in Ostend. Apparently, it's more fortified than like Gibraltar. We've got 4 mech corps. I don't think they were necessarily mech corps. I don't think it really mattered for the British or the Americans, because they pretty much are fully mechanized formations and motorized, both. But the British had like, what, troop carriers? I mean, what are you supposed to do with a dang old troop carrier? You're not supposed to use it in combat. I'm pretty sure about that. You do not want to use a Bren carrier. Bren troop carrier. Bren carrier? They must have been cheap, because there's no way this thing was useful. Excuse me. There's no way this stuff was useful in World War II, or in any war for that matter. You can't do anything with this thing. But I think it's basically just a semi-armored tractor, and you can pull stuff with it, and it's pretty mobile, probably easy maintenance. And then what else? I mean, relatively cheap for like a British vehicle. And then it could pull stuff around. I don't think it was like in Call of Duty 2 where you're like trying to get to the desert in time to protect the town. No, that's not how that would work. You would use it to pull around like a 6-pounder anti-tank gun, pretty much, right? That was the main 6-pounder. I don't know, is it LBS or is it, I think it's PND gun. Let me see. Shout out to Men of War, Assault Squad 2. That is the best game. Gates of Hell, and so it seems alright. But Men of War Assault Squad 2 Rob Z kept crashing, right? And there was like connection problems. But Rob Z, I was at one battle I played against him, Men of Warsaw Squad 2 community, on Steam. Um, I don't play that game anymore. And yeah, like, oh my goodness. I mean, he was defending the town with a Panzer IV, I believe it was a G, but it could have been an F2, but it was a Panzer IV, and it was it was brutal. One Panzer IV was knocking out like every Sherman assault that I had. I think I attacked with like 5 Shermans within maybe a 35 to 40 minute long battle, something in that range. Maybe 45, maybe it was only 30. It was not more than an hour. And within that time frame, with these slow moving Rob Z, realism vehicles, the Rangers are obviously not realistic. But my goodness, he was simply picking off one Sherman after another. I didn't really understand what was I doing wrong because I was moving with an entire Sherman column in that mod, which you can't really do in a lot of the multiplayer games. Whether it's Gates of Hell, whether it's Men of Warsaw Squad 2, it's very competitive, and so the game is very calibrated for like competitive environments, but it's not necessarily historical. Does that make sense? And so, typically historical battles. Big shout out to Sturmfuhrer. I think PK Sturmfuhrer, another great YouTube channel. I might put these links on the channel for you guys to simply click and check them out. Probably the easiest thing for you to do, or you can look it up yourselves. I'm not sure if I need to help you with that, or you want to take the time and do the research yourself. But I probably will, because of time, I probably won't do it this time, but I'll keep mentioning it. I'm still gonna, with time allowing, I will continue to play this game and continue this series, and then presumably I'll keep playing this game for a long time until I move on to a better game. So, because of that, um, we're looking at other cannons here. Nah, those are boring. We were looking at the 6-pounder. No, not some dumb cannon. I want a gun, not a cannon. Okay, we're definitely okay. I'm going to respect, what we're trying to do here. A 6-pounder British has to be British. To be clear, we're looking at the anti-tank gun of World War II. Where is it? This is not it. This is like the... Oh, I'm thinking... this actually might be the 6-pounder. Oh, okay. 6-pounder, I'm not sure. I guess that was how much the round weighed, apparently. But I know for the Americans, it was... I believe it was a standard 70-something. Either 57 millimeter or 76. I don't think they had 76 anti-tank guns, the Americans. Maybe eventually they did. I think they had 57 millimeters and 76 millimeters. But those rounds were very, effective, right? So I'm thinking of the 2-pounder, especially in the desert. Yeah, this tiny thing. This is what I'm thinking about. Yeah, I'm thinking about the 2-pounder, not the 6-pounder. Jeez. And so this vehicle here, or this platform, rather, is basically what that troop carrier can carry around. And apparently that's what these formations are all about. I don't think they probably do have heavy tanks. I don't know. I haven't researched British formations yet in great depth. But I do know that they were pioneering, at least one freaking odd man was trying to pioneer tank, armored warfare for the British Army after World War I. Because apparently there was a lot of argument back and forth. A lot of people still, even after the success of the Mark 8, I think, in World War One, right? I think it might be the Mark 8. Mark VIII tank. Let me see what pops up. Oh, nice. Yeah. After the success of this baby, also French and German, they basically, there was still a lot of argument in the British Army as to whether or not they should would focus on armored warfare. And it was apparently a very, messy process, but eventually they did seem to succeed in establishing something. And that success manifested in I believe it was Operation Compass in the desert of North Africa, right? And that happened in 1940, December 1940, right? After the Battle of France, right? After the disaster at France. And they were able to clean sweep the Italian army, right? And like piecemeal them and make their way all the way to almost Benghazi. I don't think they actually got to Benghazi, but they almost made it to Benghazi. And that was when, by the time that happened, that was like already February, March 41. That was the time when Rommel arrives, and then he's able to counter assault. It was a recon mission, apparently. Recon in force that became a full offensive operation, which was really interesting. So here, like if you want a little bit more kind of tied together to this game, we can look at they call it the setup sheet. I think other games called it like reinforcement table or something like this. Regardless of the name, it is like you could call it almost like I was gonna say, it is almost like a pre-calibrated process in which these units are arriving. So the game is, in that sense, constrained. If you play a game like Axis and Allies, I mean, you have these like special tables where you can invest in technology. And I did play against a old pal of mine who introduced me to war games. I bought some dice today. I don't know if I already used, but these are like my personal dice. 6-sided dice. I'm not going to get like anything more complicated than that. That's ridiculous. And basically, you could invest in these like technologies, and you ended up getting different like advances. And so I think I play as the Germans, or the Third Reich. I think I did one time. I think the first game he let me play as the Germans. Did I end up winning the game or losing the game? I actually have no idea who won or lost that game. It was a slugfest. I think it was ultimately some kind of like neutral outcome. But basically, that first game, I mean, we pulled the whole night. I spent the night at his home, spent the night, but I didn't even sleep at his house. we spent the whole night awake. And then in the morning, we went to church because he was Mormon. So I hung out with him while he was doing his like volunteer work as a Mormon. And so I was so tired, I'll tell you. But like I wanted to like probably keep playing in the evening. I kind of wanted to grab breakfast, take a nap, and then probably keep playing in the evening and finish the game because we didn't actually finish the game. I may have been playing as the Americans. I really don't remember. I was either playing as the Americans. I may have been playing as the Americans, and I think I was doing some like few landings into the Atlantic Ocean, or was I playing as the Germans and I was investing in like V2 rocket technology or something like that. I don't exactly remember. But it was an interesting game, and I think to be clear, I was not playing as the Soviets, the Red Army, because it's red in Axis and Allies. I did not play as them, to be very clear. But basically, because of that, I was playing as the Dark Army, and I was trying to. He taught me a concept of like the blitzkrieg and exercise. I don't know if that's actually how it works in that game. It's an interesting game, but like apparently you can move, like you can put units behind another area, but if the first round of battle fails, all those other units are lost. So it's kind of like a gamble. I'm not exactly sure why you would want to do that, but it was an interesting mechanic. And basically, I think you could like just take more territory more quickly, not just one territory per area or per turn. You could take, like in practice, you could take two areas in one turn, because the armored units can move two hexes in Axis and Allies. Right, the infantry moved one, the artillery also moved one, and so like I think he showed me that, and I think what I was able to do was like attack the first area with lots of artillery and infantry, and then I sent the armored units to only armor to the back area. And if you're familiar with Axis and Allies, you know that your armored units are more expensive. So, and it's an equal trade. It's kind of like the game of Risk, whereas there's kind of equal exchange for piece. So obviously you don't want to lose armored units against infantry because it's cost ineffective. But the concept is fascinating, and you could take more territory and at least have like kind of like a, more than anything, I would say like a quote unquote psychological. It is psychological, but it's like a psychological effect on the game, on your opponent. And when you're playing a game like that, it's not really super like sharp as other like more competitive games, right? Board games. So like you have all this kind of creative sort of like exploratory sort of flavor to it. When I was in the Civil Air Patrol, when I used to live in the U.S., I went to the Tri-Wing encampment, which is Maryland, Virginia, and I believe West Virginia. I would have to look up the map. I forget what the third state was. It was either Pennsylvania or I don't think so. I think it was West Virginia. It's definitely Virginia, Maryland for sure. And in that camp, I met a guy who was like, this was back when I was in high school, early high school, middle school, like eighth grade, ninth grade. And there, we were doing a week encampment, so like we had our uniforms, right? We had like, the old fashioned, like, I guess camo, like old camo though. And then it was a summer camp, so like we would wake up every morning, a little bit of PT, I think, but it was mostly like staying hydrated. That was like the main kind of experience was staying hydrated and drinking plasticky water on a hot summer day, which I really enjoyed. I ended up really liking that water. But it was an interesting experience. The food was pretty good. But I met this one guy who, like, he went a second time the next year. I only went 1 year. I could have gone the next year. I didn't want to go for some reason. But when I was there, like, we talked and we ended up talking about Axis and Allies. This guy, like, I thought he was like a freaking dumb brute, white boy, obviously. And I don't forget where he was from. I'm guessing he may have been from Pennsylvania, for all I know, and not Philly. He seemed more Pennsylvanian in a sense. I'm not sure where he was from. I forgot. Maybe he was from somewhere else. Probably Maryland. I don't know. Virginia. Who knows? He was somewhere. He was nearby, right? 3 hour drive, I would think, and so or more. Who knows? But we talked about that, and he was talking about invading Italy through that game, which was really interesting because it was like, oh yeah, like I did actually learn about the Italian campaign a little bit when I played the game, the board game. I got a sense, and he was like, yeah, I told like, well, I think that's what he was saying, but like we talked about that. That was really cool, and I don't know. For me, it's like those kind of moments tell me they're like there's something very potentially deeper going on in a game like this from the way the developers made the game, right? The designers, developers, so on and so forth, the way they made these games. And then of course if you hop on boardgamegeek.com, you enter the whole ocean of board games that are out there, like literally thousands and thousands of board games. I mean, there's so many that even if I wanted to, I couldn't play them all in a lifetime. So yeah, I stuck to Axis and Allies a little bit. I ended up playing on the computer a lot, and then the computer version was not as interesting. It was much more complicated. There was many different mods, a lot more territory, and the games took a very long time to play. So then I eventually found a better game. I wanted something with more information. I played Europe and Gulf, which was pretty good. But after a while, there's things that didn't really make sense to me in that game, and I think the main one was that you could take Moscow on the first turn. Now in this game, like I'm still kind of like exploring that, right? Like if I were to launch Operation Barbarossa, right, and I were to try to take whatchamacallit, Moscow on the first turn, right, within the first month, I feel like it's almost logistically impossible. But maybe not that impossible. You would need to stack up like 4 HQs, right, all level 3, and you would need to have like one army group equivalent to attack with your entire formation and keep pushing and keep pushing and pushing and make it to Moscow. But it also means that you will not be able to take like Ukraine, like you couldn't touch it. It also probably means you will not be able to attack in the north and hit Leningrad. And so what I found was that the logistics of this game is really what locks down that concept. Because in Europe and Gulf there was a logistical system, but like as long as you're able to trace the area back to the capital, it was fine. But the areas were much larger, right? They were like pretty large objects, and so you could stack up a bunch of units. I think you could stack up infinite units on those areas, and then you could just bulldoze your way to Moscow. And so it was a very odd mechanic there, and it seemed like no matter what you did as the Red Army, you couldn't stop it. You couldn't both simultaneously defend all this other area and protect Moscow at the same time. And so that seems to be some kind of potential flaw in the game. I didn't want to believe it, and I still don't exactly want to believe it. But with this game, I haven't actually tried that. I'll say that much. So all that to me is like super interesting. But yeah, let me get to my original point about Operation Compass. Right. Let's go here. Let's go to the Axis, right, or the Germans. And if I go to 1941 reinforcements, right, I think it's 41. No, apparently it's the 1939-40 table. And if we go here, if I scroll down, May 41, April, March. I think it's here. Oh yeah, here it is. I was looking for a dark squared unit, but here it is. If you look down here, you can see that it says DAK there. That's the Desert Africa Corps. And it said there's the V. If you're colorblind, hopefully you're not, but it's a black V with an orange in an orange sort of circle, and that is the Africa Corps. And as you can see, it arrives in March 41 at level 1, and I believe the turn before that, the actual HQ arrives in February. So presumably Rommel, I guess Rommel and his HQ staff, right, his like HQ division or HQ, yeah, you could call it a division, probably HQ, whatever. Yeah, I'm not sure. HQ command group, which were a real thing. The only group that I understand that actually has HQ formations, as far as I know, the ones that I actually am able to comprehend are the Americans. Because I watched Band of Brothers, and there's that one story of when they did like a recon mission, and they went out. It was directed by Tom Hanks, and they went out, and they were like scouting a region at night. They end up stumbling upon a German outpost that was firing an MG-42 or 34, probably a 42, and they're just peppering into the distance. And like they were like, what the heck are these guys doing? And what they were doing was that it had probably flares. I would presume it had flare ammunition, incendiary rounds, and they were firing into the distance to test the range of they're basically target practicing to calibrate, waiting for the Americans to arrive. They were kind of preparing for this big set piece battle, right? But what they didn't realize was that there was already American paratroopers already in that region, right? And that was the story of that group, right? 101st, and basically a small group, I think it was like a squad, maybe a platoon sized group. I think it was no more than 30, 40 men. They get there, they see the Germans peppering, they end up ambushing them. Then they pull back, expecting a counterattack, which never happens. Then in the morning, the decision of the commander was to go all out and launch a counterattack before the main attack took place. And they caught the Germans sleeping. They were literally napping after the firefight. And this was an SS battalion, to be clear. So what happened? Right, very strange experience, but basically a small group was able to, a whole another company, right? And they basically I don't even know how to put it in words there, but they basically the heavy casualties on the enemy battalion, and then what happens from there? Right. Then the Germans do succeed in counterattacking. Right. I mean, there was apparently an artillery exchange. Right. Both sides had radio, and they called a few artillery strikes. I think the Americans artillery struck first, and there was a counter artillery barrage. That's when he started to get some casualties, and then that's the difference from the movie versus what actually happens. They kept attacking. And then as they started to attack, it became very tactical. Right, and it was squad versus squad, and that's when he was getting casualties, artillery fire, something like this, and then he falls back, and that's when they pull back, and I think that's more or less when the battle comes to an end. So the question there was why were the Germans firing into the darkness? Presumably to calibrate, but then didn't they have information that the Americans had already landed in Normandy? Haven't they been preparing for that landing for years? Didn't they have some kind of simple, clear set rule: when Americans land, stay on guard at all times, something like this? And I guess they still underestimated how quickly the Americans were going to respond, especially with those paratroopers. So maybe the training was really poor, who knows? Second question then is, why didn't they counterattack? even after sustaining casualties, even after hearing gunfire. Oh, maybe, yeah, maybe, but they counterattack? Oh my god, I have to watch the episode again, but maybe that gunfire, like, they were used to people firing, doing practice firing runs the whole time. So it's a very interesting story. It's probably the best Band of Brothers story, I would say, other than the ones that have the Shermans, of course. The Battle of Carentan is amazing. I'm not sure why the Shermans were using HE rounds in that battle, but regardless, um, yeah, maybe they had like an all-purpose. Maybe they're firing heat rounds. Who knows? But um, that story for some reason is very relevant with the HQ, the story of the HQ, because the actual episode is about the commander writing the report of what happens, right? And he keeps like flashbacking to the moments, and so he's like writing, typing out. They told him to go back to command, right? And so they presumably they already established like some kind of control of the region, and he as the commander got to go back to command, and then write the report, right? And he wrote the report himself apparently. And so, that to me is like what an HQ unit represents in a game like this. But obviously in a much larger scale. And like we're talking about an HQ of an entire army or an entire corps, not of like one 101st Airborne Battalion, right? Or Airborne Regiment. Again, I would have to do more research on that. You guys can comment below. Any Americans watching, you guys probably know more than I do. Was it a 101st Airborne Battalion? Or was it 101st Airborne Regiment? But it was 101st Division? I don't think so. But it was the paratroopers, the American paratroopers, right? The elite. So having said that, let's kind of come back to this game, right? It's December 1942, and the Germans are winning, obviously, right? Like, they've taken all this territory. The Soviets have not counterattacked. In fact, I put these little red blocks to kind of, which you can add. I don't think when you play the game in person you have these available, but it's kind of like a cool fog of war element, so I'm going to keep it there. But like this clearly shows you territory control. And as you can see, I mean, the Germans have this massive bulge, which is even larger than the historical bulge along the Don River, right? If you look at like Case Blue, like that famous, Wikipedia map, right? Case Blue operation. I don't know if it's going to understand. Case Blue operation. Here, right? Like this is one of the maps. There's another one that's even more simple. Yeah, this one. I mean, this is like the most generic of the maps. I mean, you can find it almost anywhere if you study World War II online. For some reason, I can't open the whole thing. 1 second here. I wanted to see the whole picture without downloading it. Oh, okay. Oh, wait, here, this might be it. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Click again. Scroll. Oh, okay, not there. Backspace. All right, here. That's what I wanted to show, pretty much. Hang on, I can't really. Yeah, I'll probably need another monitor. All right, I mean that's pretty much it there, right? So you can see here, massive bulge. Actually, it's actually quite large, right? I mean, they crossed the Don River. I mean, I kind of want to zoom in on that. Oh, dang it. Yeah, here's another one. They crossed the Don River. They pushed their way to, making their way towards Grozny. And basically, yeah, so, like, it's something like this, right? I could put it on the map, but ideally I could just draw, right? I could find a cool animation and just, like, I could draw the line. But yeah, actually, it's about the same size. Ours may be actually a little bit smaller. I say ours, but it's like, the one in this game is a little bit smaller, right? The one here in this game is a little bit smaller, right? Probably off by a few square kilometers, 100 square kilometers or something like that. But basically, this game, the Soviets have not been able to retake this territory. Why? Because the Germans have been basically pounding Moscow. And so what's been happening is, I've been playing as the Red Army, and we've done a good job. If you've seen the last videos, if you've been following so far, it's been pretty clear that, there's a very delicate way to play with the Red Army, and it's all about reserves. My understanding is if you play as the Red Army, you want to have very strong reserves. And that's something that this game, I think, undermines a little bit, because I've actually tried to create historical setups, and like there's certain formations that don't exist in the game, right? I mean, if I pull up the pieces, right? and I go here, and these are Belgian pieces. Let's go to Russian pieces right there, right? And then like you can see the order, right? The 10th guard, 11th guard, 12th, 13th, but then there's like no 14th, right? There's the first. Oh, there's a 14th. Is there a 15th? I don't know. A 17th, presumably 19th. Keep going, keep going. These are like the Romanians, Hungarians, and I was going to say Greek, Bulgarians that switch sides. This here is the first Guard tank army, different because it's got the little circle, a little oval there. Then we got the 20th Guard. Yeah, this was a famous formation for sure. 21st, 22nd. I mean, those were very important and still are in our game when it came to like defending Moscow in 1941. And I think they participated in like Smolensk, some of them. They eventually pulled back and recovered. But really, it's around the Battle of Smolensk, 1941, right? You know, that was probably where, you know, if I believe that's where they lost the war. If you want to like look at it in a very concrete manner, if you want to look at it in a very like concrete, you know, Germanic, you know, military sort of interpretation to warfare, I would say that it was the set piece Schwerpunkt Battle of Smolensk, which ironically lacked Schwerpunkt, that led to the defeat of Army Group Center in a very like time sensitive moment. The timing was everything. And the reality was, and the German intelligence failed at this, but the Red Army had a massive pool of reserves. They had I think they called it at the time, they called it like, yeah, pardon for the noise. There's like construction going on a lot. I may have to put on some headphones. I might be right back and try to grab some headphones. There's so much noise. I'm gonna remember where I put him. I'll be right back. Yeah. So yeah, if you're out there and you are doing your best to, you know, stay focused and learn whatever you're trying to learn, I mean, the only product I would recommend buying is like some soundproof headsets if you can. If you can afford it or if you can order it or get it, because the amount of noise that it goes on in our society today is it's not good. It's really bad. It's really bad. And people, you know, seem to intentionally create noise when it's unnecessary. But like then again, I guess people have to work, and you know that's the nature of like working construction. Hopefully you can hear me. These headphones are. Hopefully you can hear me. These headphones are like definitely need. I probably had to get a new pair. They're getting worn down for sure. But what was he saying? Yeah, I think it was like and there were several different Soviet fronts, is what they call them, Soviet fronts, which were the equivalent of army groups. And so you had Army Group Center, which was the German army, right? That was the main group attacking Moscow, and that was the largest one for Barbarossa, right? Army Group South was not the priority, even though later it did become the priority. Army Group North was kind of like a sideshow. Leningrad, no one cared about Leningrad, and they were pushing for, yeah, I'm not even sure where they went after Leningrad if they didn't want to take it. That didn't make sense to me because it took up. I mean, in this game, it takes up a lot of resources. Sieging Leningrad still takes up like a whole army, right? Someone pointed out to me that you know the Finnish army can't even move into this Leningrad hex because apparently the Finnish border is here, right? And that's probably historically accurate. And they can only operate one hex. I thought it would have been this line, this summer 42, 44 line, and it is. But it's like they won't even attack Leningrad? Are you kidding me? Like, so anyways. So having said that, that's the whole German Ostia Wehrmacht side, right? But the one that's really fascinating because of the intelligence failure was the way the Soviets were preparing, right? I mean, keep in mind that it was already after the first kind of like, what would you call it? The first shock of Barbarossa, right? Right? The most important military campaign of Central Europe, you could argue, something along these lines. And so, as a result of that, as a result of that, the Red Army was in shambles. The entire Stavka, I don't think even existed when that happened. In this game, they did initially, right? But that did not exist when it did not exist on the 22nd of June, 1941. And so there was a lot of like, keep in mind we're talking about the Soviet Union. So they're not, it's not like you have an economy, then you have an industry, then you have like a banking sector. You don't, it's not like that. Everything is like mixed up into one giant sandwich. And so with Stalin, right, at the head of it, right, and he was the command center of the entire Soviet Union. And so the whole command system had fractured in those moments, hours, minutes, days. There's that whole legend, right, or myth, legend, myth, whatever. It's not that far back, but it's like you hear about how he went into his, he was like isolated for several days. I've heard different things, right? I've heard different I heard different experiences or different cases, different moments of what happened. But like presumably he went into shock, number one. Number two, he could have been simply planning. Number three, he could have been um like I don't know, maybe considering escaping the country, something like this. Number four, he could have been like simply like like I don't know, putting some kind of like flex power move on his peers, right? Um, which is exactly what's happened right now. So I'll wait because construction has been going on for like pretty much from the moment I got here. It started. And it has not let down at all. But I guess that makes sense, right? You know, pay the rent, then the money's invested in building more, and it goes on like that. I spill coffee on this notebook I had. Having said that, I'll tell you, like, if you can find a place, a quiet space, maybe like a library or something, where you can sit and focus, I admire your ability to do that because it's surprisingly difficult to find quiet places almost anywhere these days, as far as I know. I've been looking for at least 4 years now, and I haven't found a quiet place. Other than like I don't know, being in a desert for like a night in Utah, right? That was like the only quiet place I found, and it was like I didn't have like a computer, I didn't have a desk or something, to do this, but there are places that do exist that are quiet. But you have to kind of go pretty far out to find them. So the Soviet side, I only have a few minutes left. I'm going to wrap it up here. But the Soviet side, um, they had different fronts as well. They weren't even called fronts; they were called military districts. And this game does a really good job of that. If you go to like 1939, right? See, MD, Leningrad MD, Western MD, Ukrainian MD, Southern MD, and I think there was a Northwestern MD as well. Okay, so this Western one I think was correct. The Leningrad was actually called Northwestern. There were actually two different sectors, I think. Or yeah, I believe I would my that's my understanding. The Ukrainian MD was called the Ukrainian. The Southern MD was called the Southern Military District as well. these all instantly transformed into fronts as soon as the invasion began. The Northwestern Front was gone, right? Wiped clean. So you had the Leningrad was the only one that was left, and so I think they kind of merged that together. The Western military district was also battered, right? And that was the famous encirclement. I think it was the Fourth and Ninth Army, right? Well, I mean, it wasn't that the encirclement wasn't that big, but on the map, it's very impressive if you study Barbarossa, right? And if you read about Barbarossa, you're like, oh, you hear a lot about that big encirclement, right? And that happened around. I was going to say Bryansk, but it's Bialystok, right? Which is actually in Poland. And then the next set piece battle for Army Group Center was Smolensk. And so who was facing them, right? Who was the opposition? And this is the whole game that the Soviets were effectively playing for a long time. They won the reserve buildup. Another great YouTuber, I don't really agree with a lot of his the stuff that he talks about, but TIK, it stands for the Imperial Knight, and he's probably one of the best historians on the subject. He made the Stalingrad series, and so he made the Stalingrad series that exists, and he talked about the way the reserves were built up on the for the German side, the Third Reich, and it was problematic. And this is what the Nazis were so working so hard to do, was try to build up this reserve because of the Nuremberg trials, right? Post World War I, 1918, the German army was downsized to only 100,000. And so that 100,000 became the elite officer corps, right? The elite academy officer corps, but they still didn't have enough reserves to build up for something like Barbarossa in 41. And so, the quality was started to drop down, right? They needed a lot of non-commissioned officers. They probably lacked officers more than actual manpower. And so, like, there was a whole reserve problem that the Third Reich Osttier had suffered from that the Soviets didn't, ironically, because the Soviets, even though they were going through the Great Purge, they actually still were going to rebuild up their officer group from the ground up. And so that's what they were in the process of doing, and this game shows that as well. If you don't attack the Soviets, which I would not recommend, don't leave the Soviets, on their own. But what ends up happening is that the Soviets can build up like triple fire tank units, I think, or something like that, shock groups, and they have this massive formation that is really impressive. I would love to see I would love to play that game or see someone play that game. I hope to see that at some point, and we'll make a video about it. But yeah, the Red Army can become really strong even if you wait 1 year. And this is what I did in Europe and Gulf. You give it a year. Even in 1942, trying to invade the Red Army, the Soviet Union in 1942, is day and night completely different than invading in 1941. Why? Because they would have filled in the ranks with the equipment that they needed to buffer against, basically the Panzerwaffe, right? The Panzer divisions. So, as a result of all that, who was facing them at Smolensk, right? It was a reserve front. It was the reserve front, which this game also has. Right here. This is basically the strategic reserve. There was another group, though, and I think it was called the Western Front. And then there was also, may or may not have been the Bryansk Front as well. There was like 2 or 3 fronts that were all kind of shifting around simultaneously, different command structures, all operating simultaneously to counter one German army group. And that's partly why they lost the Battle of Smolensk, but they inflicted critical losses on Army Group Center in a very time-sensitive moment when the Wehrmacht was expanding. They weren't concentrating anymore like they did along that mid-Polish border. They were now spreading out because they thought they had already wiped out the Red Army, right? They didn't believe the Red Army had a large reserve. Other people talk about this, but basically what you have is, I think there was presumably 50,000 reserves is what they expected. Maybe 500,000 reserve troops, which is what was probably more realistic to what the Wehrmacht had in terms of reserves. But the Red Army actually had, I think, something on the order of what, 6 million troops. I think they had like 8 million or 14 million reservists at the time. They weren't equipped. They didn't have the equipment yet, but they had the basic military training. They had like, I don't know, 8 weeks of boot camp or something like this. And so that is what the Red Army would use for the rest of the war. And year after year after year, the casualties were brutal, right? 41, 3 million casualties. 42, like another 2 million. 43, probably similar, 2, 3 million, something like this. So that's already 8 million. By 44, I think it was like another 2 million or 3 million. So by the time you get to Berlin, the Red Army was actually low on reserves by the time they got to Berlin. They were actually dealing with a reserve shortage, ironically. And so there's a whole thing to unpack. So it's not really like one side had technology, the other side had manpower. It was more, I would say, more of like a kind of yin. You could say some sort of like yin yang analogy there, right? Except I would change the colors instead of like white for yang, black for yin. I would say it was um, black for yin, red for yang. And that seemed to be more of the game that this game is about. And you can kind of get a little bit of that, but of course, this game is very mechanical. There's really cool animations that kind of show you more of the ebb and flow. But because of time, I'm not gonna actually play this game. It's winter right now. It's December 42, so probably nothing's gonna happen anyways. So we're gonna. I simply wanted to make a video. I haven't made a video in some time, and so I wanted to make a video and just say thank you for studying history. If you're someone who's been following the channel for some time, I myself appreciate that you are studying history, whoever you may be. And like, yeah, historians, I don't know if there's really like a job outside of being like a school teacher, right? But like, it's to me, it's probably still the single most valuable, um, you could say, what is it, practice that, one can do in society, regardless of what year. But like even in 2026, even in the 21st century, being a historian is fascinating, it's valuable, but most people do not study their history. So as a result of that, yeah, as the saying goes, history tends to repeat itself, which I don't, which is absolutely incorrect. But it only has cyclical natures because people didn't study what has already been done before, and they thought they were doing something new. And so, yeah, yes, there is obviously a cyclical nature, but that's the nature of history, right? Is it if in the academic world, is it an art or is it a science? Is it a humanities or is it a social science? It's clearly not a hard science. So because of that, yeah, because military history is different than history. So there's a lot to unpack on there, but this probably message is better suited to anyone who studies political science, right? But I don't know how many political scientists we have on this channel. I would believe most of us were simply war gamers, people who like playing World War II games or war games of other eras, Napoleonic, uh, whatever was British, and then what else? That's I would say that's the main community, right? We're kind of like the industrialists of on the history side, on the wargaming side, right? Military history. Obviously, you can go much deeper than that, but there's too much unknown. It's much simpler to study World War II, I would say, because of how big the event was and how much happened, and how apparently the Cold War ended in 1989 or 1991 in that range, but then it's like here we are in 2026, and well, I mean I'm still trying to make heads or tails, as the saying goes. I don't like that saying at all. But I'm still trying to make like sense of this game at the very least. And for me, it's a relief to do this. So I thank you for watching. Obviously, like and subscribe, all that fun stuff. I'm not going to repeat myself on that. But if you want to help the channel grow, my biggest suggestion is, obviously you could donate, but I'm not going to really do that yet on this channel. I would simply say encourage other people You know, invite more people to play the war games that you're playing, right? If you're playing a game like Eurofront and you are a big adamant fan of the game, right? Eurofront Second Edition. Check out the links below if you want to buy the game. My best advice is go invite people to play the game. You know, they may be like, oh, I don't know, I'm not very good at board game. Like, get them to play 10 minutes of the game if you can, because like it's an amazing game. It's really well designed. It's one of the best for sure. I agree on that. It is a very well designed game. But again, you know, right now playing as the Red Army is like, why don't I have a line here of like cavalry divisions or something? I don't know, British Lend-Lease troop carriers, whatever, that I can use to like retake some of this territory. Why isn't that? Why is that seems to be missing in this game? And it's probably because I'm not playing well with the Soviets, is what I've presumed. But like I'm still trying to play as the Soviets. I have also made some modifications for the German invasion. As you saw, I had more buildup. I had more Panzer. I had like an extra Panzer army. I had a little bit more infantry. So maybe that's the difference. Again, a lot of that you could say is heuristics, which I don't want to even get into that. But basically, yeah, something along these lines. You know, anyways, my time is pretty much up here. Um, yeah, the time is 10:04 a.m. Central Time. So I will see you guys in another video. Thank you so much for watching. What else can I say? What else do I want to say? I feel like there is something more I have to say here that is like of value. Um, and I'm not sure what it is. I mean, we can look at the front. I mean, yeah, North Africa is about to fall. That's pretty cool. The British have fortified on their own without the American help and landed. But the Americans are on their way. You know, the rest of Europe is all quiet. And then, what else? I really, I feel like right now, the Red Army needs a miracle, basically, right? Like, we need something to really change up the strategic situation. Otherwise, I think it's inevitable. If Kaluga or Moshaizk falls the way Tula fell, it's it's over, man. Kaluga, if Kaluga falls or Moshaizk falls, I think the war is going to be over at that point. Or Moscow inevitably is going to fall. I don't think there's anything that can be done to save Moscow. If you have any suggestions, right? If you're a, you know, if you've played this game, you're really good at it. If you have any suggestions on what I can do here to basically defend these two positions, right? I was able to defend Ryazk pretty well. You know, what do we need to do here, right? I would have, I mean, if I were the Russians, I would probably do like a paratrooper landing, but I'm not going to land with one paratrooper behind enemy lines. That doesn't do anything, right? That's Battle of Moscow, winter, disaster, and the German army eventually recuperates from that. So it's like we need something else to really like smash this massive dark army that is building up around Moscow. And it's like, what needs to happen? Exactly what needs to happen here with these formations. I mean, there's a lot, right? There's two over here, another six total, plus another two, that's eight, plus another six, that's 14, plus three more, that's 17. At least 17 units, few HQ units. But yeah, it is time that I do head out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Do take care of yourselves. And yeah, I'll see you in another moment.